All right, industrial society and its future. Ted Kaczynski, Unabomber. Be talking about some of his ideas. He's a very infamous person, very problematic individual. Ted Kaczynski graduated at Harvard around, I think it was 16, or studied in MIT or something like that, or went to the University of Michigan for mathematics. Very gifted individual, IQ of 160 or something, even though we don't know if that's truly what it was, as it was reported. Very gifted individual, right? It was hinted that he was a part of the MKUltra experiments, which the MKUltra experiments have to do with some type of brainwashing, control of highly intelligent individuals and coercing them in order to do certain things within the United States government, because they had also believed that the Soviet Union, through aspects of propaganda and brainwashing, was controlling people to manipulate them into being a part of the communist regime, things like that. That was around the 50s. In the 60s, major psychologists had been in those sorts of fields, doing those sorts of testing and analysis. Things like groupthink and, whether or not this specific line is bigger than this other line and stuff. And this line A is clearly bigger than line B, but if you get enough people to agree that line B is actually bigger than line A, then ultimately on average, more people do believe that line B is longer, since more people had voted for it, obviously being props and like actors in the situation. So, Ted Kaczynski, Unabomber. Why is he infamous? Why does it seem like our American society and our American culture is bringing his name up again in media and in political activists and extremist movements? Well, Ted Kaczynski had moved away after his, I think, professorship or something. He was only a professor for a very short amount of time. He had aspects of psychopathy and sociopathy. He was very cold, calculated, and was not very warm or affectionate, especially when he was a child. When he was a child, he had, I think, smallpox or something like that, or he had some type of infection, and he was separated and isolated in an incubator for around like 2 weeks in pure isolation when he was a child. He was very, very little. And that, according to a lot of his family members, had made him anxious, irritable, and very apathetic and unempathetic to his to his family and just people in general. But I want to focus more so on his ideas. But it's important to have at least a general understanding of his background in order to understand exactly where his thought processes are within this. So he started writing The Industrial Society and Its Future in a cabin in the woods, away from as much civilization as he possibly could. And hence the title, Industrial Society and Its Future. He was not exactly optimistic or happy about the implications of what further technological and industrial society advancements would lead to. So I think it's important to first start with his main point that he starts with, which is the power process. It is a point of three distinct levels of the power process. So the first level of the power process is this. It goes the amount of energy that you need to put in, or the power to give something is not as intense of trying to find basic survival needs and goods: shelter, food, water, things like that. Hunting, it becomes relatively easy. The second process is things that provide a little bit more give and take. So I need to give in a little bit more energy. I need to sacrifice things a little bit more in order to achieve these goals. And the third is that it's either virtually unattainable, or I need to sacrifice virtually everything of myself in order to reach this specific goal or reach this specific amount of power. John Kaczynski believes, or Ted Kaczynski, sorry, I'm looking at his middle name. Ted Kaczynski believed that within an industrialized, not even necessarily capitalized society, that these societies birth oppression, they birth totalitarianism, they birth, sorry. This is not working. Alright, we're just gonna deal with that. Okay. Sorry about that. So, yes, with Ted Kaczynski, he believed that within that power process that it would ultimately lead into totalitarianism. So yes, you might be able to have some of those basic needs, right, met. You can have the very basic needs, but ultimately, when you're trying to make a name for yourself, or have a good job, or have a sustaining business, or have a sustaining part in the economic space and social statuses of technological societies, that they're ultimately replaced, and you are unable to then be fulfilled unless you are using the technology provided within the given system in order to be a part of it. So in order to make a name for yourself and to relatively live comfortably and things like that, you ultimately have to be a part of the system. You need to utilize capital. You need to utilize machines and know how to operate them, and encodes and computing and increasing that sort of processing power, right? Well, Ted Kaczynski believes that this is a very negative thing. It's a very problematic thing. And this will ultimately, as societies want to increase their power and increase their technological innovations, that when they do so, it ultimately will utilize people more together in a collectivization. This is exactly why he critiques leftism as well, because he believes that leftism is primarily a collectivized unit. So they utilize themselves under social and cultural standpoints. He would say LGBTQ plus in the book, civil rights, things like that, where those are like the dangers of leftism, that they use civil and social, cultural issues in order to collectivize people, and then they will then enslave them and control them totally, of totalitarianism. He also then explains within the scientific and academic worlds that they are just as oppressive, if not the core benefactors and influencers of a totalitarian sort of industrial society. Same with psychologists. He believes that with psychology, that they use the human psyche to promote it and to constantly stimulate it with new ideas and with new information, and to only treat symptomatic problems of the system itself. That the increase of suicide rates and the increase of depression rates and the increase of just general unhappiness and anxiety in societies is only medicated with medication and ritualistic therapy, believing that it's not a chemical imbalance necessarily of those problems that you just need to solve it with a quick pill, but that it's a deeper problem of the actual society in and of itself, that it's stripped away from nature. And that's a very core aspect of Ted Kaczynski's book in Industrial Society and Its Future, is that the more that you are removed away from nature, the more problematic and unfulfilled that human beings feel, is what he believes. And kind of moving more towards a primitivistic society where people are more together. They're not utilizing technology in capital-based markets, where the industry, the economy, the society itself is run on innovation. He does not believe that that is a good thing. Keeping innovation relatively minimalistic, only using resources for nomadic sort of tribes and things, he believes that that natural man is better than the modern man. That the modern man is sort of repressed in these ways, and is repressed from being able to fulfill his power process, that he believes that things were relatively easy and were more fulfilling back in, a couple 100,000 years ago when we were evolving and developing. He believes that that is a better society. Even that medieval societies were better as well, that they were not as totalitarian or oppressive as other nations, since they did not have the technology or the industry in order to watch over everyone. So how does he want to create this? Well, how he wanted to create this was through spontaneous destruction. Anyone who is in high places of elitism or authority, politicians, the actual industrial workers, the scientists, the doctors, you believe that all of those people were using industry and using technology, maybe not for nefarious reasons at first, but ultimately he believed that the actions that they are eventually taking will result in more technology, and then it will be all-encompassing. And then when all of that technology is all-encompassing, it will control every aspect of society, and men and women will feel as if there is no room for their creativity, no room for their expression, no room for any of their thoughts or opinions anymore. They will become shells of human beings, right? He believes that in order to prevent this from happening, that you need to destroy the entire technological industries as much as possible, destroying the banks, destroying the pharmaceutical companies, destroying all these sorts of things, as much federal government-based systems as you possibly can. Things like that. Of course, problems with that. Numerous problems with that. It is heinous. It's disgusting. His recognizing of these problems is very accurate. There is a lot of problems in this book that he discusses that are true, that we have seen even within the last 30 years. I do not disagree with him on the problems that he has stated about our current modern society. However, big however, is that his solutions to these problems are just a reinvigoration of the exact same problems. And how do we know that we cannot prevent industrialization to happen again? And through this utilitarian sort of approach of the greater common good that he is trying to find, how do we know that that time in civilization was actually better? We don't. People were dying of starvation, they died of diseases, they died of poverty on a way greater scale. They were murdered by animals, ravenous animals. They still had other nomadic groups and tribes that they had to kill, weather conditions, all these things. But again, it goes back to his nature. He wants to be more integrated within nature. If you're more integrated within nature, then, the byproduct of being integrated within more nature is that it's natural. That's just a part of the process, that we shouldn't stray too far away from natural principles, because straying away from natural principles will ultimately be the end of human society and humanity, even though humans naturally are against nature and are trying to fight against nature. That is a core aspect of human beings, of most animals, is that the will to live, the wanting to live, going back to Schopenhauer, wanting to strive to live even against all possible circumstances. So, of course, with Unabomber, he tried dropping bombs on planes, nail bombs on other people in high places. He did it also with families. He did it with scientists and computing engineers and computer scientists and people in those prestigious universities and fields that he had attended before. It was actually his brother who had caught him, who read a line of, "You cannot have your cake and eat it too." He had spelled it differently, or phrased the sentence differently. It was actually caught because of that. I'll read a couple of passages in this. Let's see. Actually, I want to go back and do the future. I'll do this part first if I can find it. Revolution is easier than reform. Page 63, line 140. We hope we have convinced the reader that the system cannot be reformed in such a way as to reconcile freedom with technology. The only way out is to dispense with the industrial technological system altogether. This implies revolution, not necessarily an armed uprising, but certainly a radical and fundamental change in the nature of society. That's kind of bullshit, because in order to actually fulfill this sort of way, people will not do this willingly. Most people, even what he says psychologically, are bounded to the machine, are to the technological processes of this society, and are not willing to give it up. And since they are not willing to give it up, he does talk about murdering these people. The future. Suppose now that industrial society does survive the next several decades, and that the bugs do eventually get worked out of the system so that it functions smoothly. What kind of system will it be? We will consider several possibilities. First, let us postulate that the computer scientists succeed in developing intelligent machines that can do all things better than human beings can do them. In that case, presumably all work will be done by vast, highly organized systems of machines, and no human effort will be necessary. Either two cases might occur. The machines might be permitted to make all of their own decisions without human insight, or else human control over the machines might be retained. If the machines are permitted to make all their own decisions, we cannot make any conjectures as to the result, because it is impossible to guess how such machines might behave. We only point out that the fate of the human race would be at the mercy of the machines. It might be argued that the human race would never be foolish enough to hand over all powers to the machines, but we are suggesting neither that the human race would voluntarily turn power over to the machines, nor that machines would willfully seize power. What we do suggest is that the human race might easily permit itself to drift into a position of such dependence on the machines that it would have no practical choice but to accept all of the machine's decisions. Ted Kaczynski also states that within freedom, the true idea of freedom is only predicated that you were able to control the machines, as he says. With certain technological advancements, of course, when we have, stone pickaxes and stone materials of the Stone Age and the Bronze Age and the Iron Age and all these things, and agricultural production and things like that, is that once you get the chain rolling, once you get the ball moving, that it becomes the need for more and for more and for more. And what's kind of hard to see within this book is how to actually stop these sorts of problems. How do we stop the need for technological and industrial innovation to keep on continuing? That's one of the problems within capitalism, is the need for continuous and constant stimulated economic growth, and the inability of foresight to actually be able to make sure that that is a considerable reality. Ted Kaczynski doesn't really give us very much as to how to actually stop these problems. How do we actually prevent these problems? He doesn't provide us with really very much answers. We will end up with the exact same problem. We will end up with the exact same way. So, hopefully I described that enough. I think I did. I think I got an overgeneralization of his points, and there's obviously a lot of nuance within his problems, but of course this man was a psychopath. He was insane. But it is important to understand his ideas, the critiques of the system in and of itself, considering he was a part of the system, and finding more ethical ways of dealing with this, because it will lead to the exact same problem again. Even if we become back, or go back into a naturalistic society, it must be said that those problems are human. Those problems are innate to the very DNA structure and skeletal structure of the human being. So you get rid of the system, you try to force humans to assimilate back into nature, they will unbind themselves to nature in order to try to get more comfortable. Comfort is our destruction, but toil is also our destruction. So how do we balance that? I don't know. I'm just providing the problems. So people that are smarter than me, take it away. Go and solve our problems. But all right. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll probably, I don't know if I'll keep making videos daily. I just kind of get some spur of motivation as of recently to try to keep posting, just so hopefully I get picked up in the algorithm and stuff. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, all that stuff.